Hey boyos, Thaladin here. Today in this video, I'm going to teach you how to not be a dumbass while tanking, or at the very least, a dumbass who knows how to tank halfway decent. This video is going to be aimed at general tank knowledge in Final Fantasy XIV. It's not going to dive too deeply in any one specific class. I think I'm going to have a dumbass guide to Paladin, Dark Knight, whatever in the future. These are general tanking good practices so that you know going into any tank what you need to do. First thing I'm going to be covering is how to run dungeons. I don't think it's the most difficult thing in the world, but you do tank a little bit differently in dungeon than you do with single target bosses. So we're going to be covering that. Step 1, turn on your tank stance. Well, I turned it off there, but I don't think you need to be told to do this if you're level 80, but you know, I did market this as a dumbass guide, so turn on your tank stance. Next, utilize sprint when you're pulling mobs. Use it before the pull starts. That gives you 20 seconds of sprint because you're out of combat as opposed to 10 seconds, so you have extra time. Why? Sprint is mitigation. You outrun enemy auto attacks. AoE the mobs as you go. Don't do any of that like shield toss, tomahawk shit unless it's like really just a single mob that's there. Make sure you AoE and hit them and just run. Lesson number 2, use your cooldowns on these mobs. Don't save them for the boss. That's some beta energy shit. Use these cooldowns on all these large number of mobs hitting you. Why? Because they hurt more than the bosses. The bosses suck. Like, let's be honest. Like, they're cool. They're cool and all. Like, they have good vibes, cool AoEs. But as far as like just the damage that they output on your character, they just don't do that much. Don't bother popping these cooldowns on bosses. You have your personal, you can use that on the boss. Don't save your 20% or your 30% for the boss. Pop it, stagger it, and make sure that you're helping your healer out here. Because you know what your healer is doing on the boss? They're casting glare. That's what they're doing, and they don't care if you cool down. So use them here to mitigate this damage, and for the love of God, use your invuln. It is okay to use your invuln. In fact, it should be on cooldown. You can get 2 uses out of that in a dungeon if you use it nice and early on a big pool. So don't be afraid to just blow your cooldowns on mobs. Stagger them a little bit so that you have constant mitigation. Like I popped Rampart and Sentinel together here. Probably didn't need to do that. Would go Rampart then Sentinel. And pop Arm's Length. Arm's Length puts a slow effect on all of these enemies whenever they do damage to me. That means, well, that enemy didn't do any damage to me. But you see right here, that means that he is attacking me slower. It's very useful. And Reprisal's AoE now, so we can use that too. You notice that my health here? See how low my health has gotten? Like, I mean, it's taken a while because I have this unsynced, but just like, see how low my health has gotten. And I'll just go and I'll look at a boss real quick. Okay, doesn't really help me if I dodge the first hit, but let's see how much he does. 5,000? Baby numbers. Absolutely baby. I regen most of that. Look at that. Those auto attacks do nothing. Swing, avoidable. And any tank buster he does will do a little bit, but for that you just use your personal. And it's nice and easy. But my point is that these bosses don't do anything in damage. So don't waste your cooldowns on them. Oh, and you know what? Additionally, just so you know, also, this is across the board a tip, not just for tanks, but use your damage cooldowns on those mobs, because those mobs dying faster is the best mitigation you can do while in dungeon running. And if the bosses technically go a little bit slower, it's still a faster run overall. But anyways, that's all for dungeon tanking. Well, let's get to the good stuff. Alright, now we're here for the good stuff. The real reason why you guys clicked on this. Let's talk about single target shit. Let's talk about what you do when you're face-to-face with an extreme boss or a raid boss or even a dungeon boss. Let's see the do's and do-nots. So let's talk about the general cooldowns. Most tanks have a 20%, some sort of greater cooldown on a longer timer. That's like a 30%. They have a personal, and then they have reprisal. These are all major points of mitigation. Hey, get out of my video. Bye. See ya. And then they have their invuln. Now here's the first dumbass mistake. Your invuln is not an oh shit button in this game. This is a common misconception. I can understand it. I understand you're running with some pugs and you're like, well, you know, I don't want to die randomly to auto attacks, but that is not the purpose of an invuln if you want to tank well and not like a dumbass. This invuln is a tool, because otherwise it just sits in your toolbox and you're just like, well, you know, the fight's going okay. Well, am I low enough now? No. Use that shit. Use it early. Use it a lot. because a lot of them have pretty big cooldowns. Hollow Ground has like this, like, what, 7-minute cooldown? Warrior is pretty nice. It has a significantly shorter cooldown with Home Game. If you use this early in the fight in an intentional way, you can make it really easy on your healers and get another use of it later in the fight. This is not an oh shit button. This is a tool for you to plan around. If there's anything you can take away from this video, let it be that. Number 2, if you're new to this game and you're looking at auto attacks and wondering when they start hurting, they don't. Ever. Auto attack damage is, for the most part, pretty baby shit in this game. I'm hoping Endwalker changes that a little bit, but for now, you don't really need to do any active mitigation for auto attacks, because healer regens will pretty much top you off from those. Most of the damage comes in quick, scripted bursts with downtime where the tank doesn't have to worry about shit. That makes it really easy to plan your mitigation if you're going to be doing a fight over and over again, like if you're progressing in a raid, because you use your invuln at your earliest convenience for a good tank buster. You look at the tank busters that come after and you say, how many cooldowns can I throw at each one until my invuln is back up? That is the primary way of planning your cooldowns in raids, or even in extreme primals, even though I think those are a little bit less demanding. Let me run through roll actions real quick since it's a nice little segue. Rampart is over here. It's a roll action. That's your 20%. Reprisal is a 10% damage reduction for all nearby enemies. You can use this for tank busters, though I think it's more commonly used for raid-wise. That really just depends on your fight and you coordinating with your co-tank. You have a stun here, which is nice. You have arm's length, which you can use it in a dungeon as a cooldown, but in the single target scenario, it's far more actively used as your knockback mitigation. If a move's going to knock you across the arena, you hit arm's length, and that does not happen. Interject is an interrupt, simple as that. Shirk. Oh, Shirk. Okay, well, we're going to talk about Provoke and Shirk in the Enmity section, because that will be later. I lied. I decided to talk about Enmity right now. Let's talk about Provoke and Shirk. Provoke is a move that will put you at the top of the threat list. If somebody was tanking this lovely striking dummy... Hey, how you doing? You having a good time over here? You getting off work later? If somebody was tanking this striking dummy and they were a million threat ahead of me, I hit Provoke, which is still down because I planned terribly, and it puts me at the top of the threat list with a little bit of extra threat. It does not give me guaranteed threat for a set amount of time. It just says, hey, here's the max threat that is currently on the target, and add a little bit of wiggle room. A little bit of wiggle room. If you are being provoked off of, you are tanking the boss and a tank provokes it off of you, the answer is to fight them for supremacy if you're in Alliance raid. Did you get excited? Did you get hyped? Were you like, oh man, I'm already doing that? It was a trap. That's not what you should do. You should not spin the boss and play tank roulette in Alliance raids. That being said, if you're in a more controlled environment, a tank provokes off of you, what you should do is use Shirk. Shirk takes 25% of your threat and throws it to somebody else. So you can either do that to your fellow tank or a DPS who's gotten too much of an ego. This Shirk macro is very useful. I have it right here. It's just like, it shirks the person who's second in your party list, which should be your co-tank. Very easy to do, but you just shirk them, and then that is how tank swaps are operated in this game. A provoke, and then a shirk. That is how it goes. And apart from that, for Enmity, just throw on tank stance. Like, Enmity management doesn't exist in this game. It used to, but Square said, oh boy, nobody likes that, so they took it out. You will stay ahead of any healer or DPS just by having your tank stance on. The only other person you're fighting for threat is your tanks. Let's talk about positioning the boss and dumbass mistakes that can happen here. So, dumbass mistake number 1, if you have aggro on the boss and you're doing your tanky thing and you're having a good time, having a great time, don't point the boss at the group. A good rule of thumb is whether you're tanking him in the middle or at the edge. Oops, didn't mean to hit you. You don't want to do this. Do you see that claw swipe that Ifrit's doing? That is called a cleave, and that hurts everybody. That's an even worse cleave. That hurts everybody in a cone around the boss. So if you do that and a DPS dies, they're going to be really salty that you ruined their pars on an extreme fight that they really shouldn't care about their pars in. And you just don't want to deal with that kind of toxicity. But keep them focused off, facing out of the arena. at pretty much all times. Sometimes they get animation locked, like let's say when he's casting Eruption and there's like a stack marker that appears, then it's fine to turn the boss because the boss won't move. But if you do that, like let's say there's a cast time, like let's say if he'll do a cast of some sort. Look at this Eruption cast. He is not turning, right? He finishes his animation and I move back and he has not actually turned. That is what I'm talking about. So in those instances, dodge if you need to, and then immediately return to your tanking position unless there's a mechanical reason not to. Oh, speaking of movement, don't do this shit that you see me doing right now. Like, oh yeah, it's an action game. I'm gonna just like come over here, left strike, right strike. No, don't do this. There are melee who need to hit the back and the flank at different points in their rotation, and you have just made them your mortal enemy, because now you're that jackass. So don't spin the boss, keep them planted in one place as much as possible so that they know exactly where they need to be to hit all their positionals. Let's talk about moving the boss. So when you move the boss, this is more of a just like a personal DPS thing. You have to move the boss for a mechanic, right? And they're not mechanically locked or something, and you're worried about losing your damage. I see a lot of people run up and then shield lob. I don't even have shield. Where's the shield? Here's shield lob. This is how you see how often I use shield lob. I didn't know where it was in my bar. Like I literally didn't know where it was in my bar. And here's the reason why. If you do damage, like see how I have a combo right here, like my Riot Blade is the next thing in my combo? Let me shield lob. I lost my combo. This is changing in Endwalker. In Endwalker, you'll be able to shield lob to your heart's content from range without your combo breaking, which is a fantastic change. It'll actually make that ability useful. But in general, that's kind of a last resort. What you want to do when moving them is the stair-step motion. So I move here. Oh, I move him. Dip in. Well, okay, you want to jump away. What a jackass. Take two. I want to move him to the edge. 1 GCD. I move him a little bit. I don't run back in. 2 GCD. And you just like do the stair-stepping motion. That way you don't lose your combo. Obviously, there are cases where you can't do that, where you need to attack from range, and depending on your tank, you might have different tools on how to deal with that. And if for some reason that doesn't help with your group, because sometimes that stair-stepping motion can be painful in certain fights, just work with them. But that is an option you have. So just learn how to dip and dive. There are 2 other things I want to talk about. Let's say you're main tanking, you're about to pull this. This is a boss right here, and the countdown's about to hit 0. So 3, 2, 1, it's pull time. You do this. Stop that. Stop that. You see what I did right there? Let's do it. Let's rewind it. Let's rewind it so that you can see it again. 3, 2, 1, go. Bad. Bad. Develop a Pavlovian response. The reason why you don't do this is because if you pull with a ranged attack, like say Holy Spirit on Paladin or like Shield Lob or Tomahawk, 1, you can time things a little bit better, and 2, the boss will run to you. Which means that all of your little buddies over here that are chilling with you, I can't put up markers because I'm in combat, but your melee dude, your Dragoon here, your Monk here, your Samurai here, they don't have to pop sprint and run the entire length of the arena to get their first GCD. That is why. The second reason why is that, do you notice something? Boom. Oh. See how long it took for my Fast Blade to activate? You end up clipping your GCD, which means you end up cutting into the time on your GCD timer, which you don't have a GCD timer yet because it's your first move, but you delay your first GCD significantly by doing this because you're animation locked. So don't use your gap closer to start a fight. Seriously, if there is anything you can take away from this video besides the invuln thing, because that's important too, don't start fights with your gap closer. It is a surefire way to signal to everyone around you that you don't know what you're doing, friend. So if only for your own pride. But that's okay, because you're here to learn. That's why we dumbasses, we gotta stick together. And in the spirit of that, I'm gonna die from shame from this, but let me tell you about something I used to do. So I would be doing damage to a boss, right? And let's say that a mechanic were to come up, and I have to run away from the boss. And now I can go back into the boss. This is what I used to do. I used to actually run back into the boss instead of using my gap closer, even if it would clip my GCD. And that probably doesn't sound that bad. Like, okay, maybe it would only clip my GCD sometimes, but sometimes it was like guaranteed to clip into my GCD a little bit. And not an entire GCD, maybe like a quarter of a GCD, that's still really bad. And my reasoning for it was that I wanted my intervention, my gap closer that does damage, because Square thinks that's a good idea, to fit inside my fight or flight window for both of their uses. And while this is optimal when it can happen, let's do the math. Fight or flight increases physical damage dealt by 25%. Intervention is 200 potency. That means that it gets 50 potency from fight or flight. 50 potency, keep that in mind. If I clip my GCD, and if I lose a single GCD because I clipped it because I didn't want to do this when I needed to, let's look at even the weakest GCD on my bar. Fast Blade is 200. Now imagine if I miss 2, or if the GCD that's missed is, God forbid, an Atonement, which is 550 potency. It's just not a good trade-off. And I thought this was a good idea, because I was like, oh yeah, I'm being optimal. Like, it's a little bit of a sacrifice, but I'm being optimal because I'm getting everything under my buff window. And in a vacuum, that's fine. But you have these utility abilities for a reason, and it's a shame they have potency on them, because you don't think that they would, but use it. If there is not another option. Don't clip your GCD. That's the most important thing. Why did I go into this long tirade about gap closers and potency and all that jazz? Because this guide was made by dumbasses for dumbasses. So I'm with you. Trust me. I have and continue to be there in a lot of ways. I hope this has been helpful for some people who maybe have gotten to endgame or are looking forward to what tanking is like at endgame, and kind of like cleared up maybe some general tanking misconceptions or questions that they had. That was kind of just the goal with all this, to teach you how not to make dumbass mistakes, because I've been there. I've been tanking in this game since it released, and like I showed you before, I've made plenty of dumbass mistakes. If you want some more tank specific, like more Gunbreaker specific or Paladin specific tips, let me know in the comments below, and like the video and subscribe. Seriously, liking the video lets me know that you guys don't think that this content is hot dog shit and you want to see more of it. So definitely tell me, and I appreciate you guys watching, and I will catch you guys in the next video. What the fuck was that?